Hola, bonjour, guten tag, konnichiwa. I'm Dave Clark, and I'm excited to apply for the Manager of Development position at the MTC. First, I'd like to tell about my management experience. In 1995, while a student at Weber State, I started the U.S. translation company with a partner. In that job, I coordinated the desktop publishing of documents. I worked with translators all over the world in 108 languages. As part of the business, I started language instruction. I created our initial Spanish course, trained instructors to teach at corporations, and worked with instructors giving guidance to create manuals in-house. We created manuals and workbooks for 3 levels of Spanish, 6 levels of ESL, 3 levels of French, a level of Japanese and Portuguese. Then in 2001, I sold out to my partner who kept the translation side of the business, and I continued with the language instruction part of the business. Here's my management experience with that business, the U.S. Institute of Languages. At its peak, I managed a team of 19 in-house employees. I worked with 3 key software developers, generally students, and up to 7 technical content developers, also students. Together, we created 4 complete award-winning Spanish language courses in about 5 years. Simultaneously, I worked with our marketing team who took care of paid online ads. I oversaw a large paid online referral program. I did much of the work myself to create the internet marketing to get to the top of Google. I also worked with our customer service team to keep customers happy and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. I wrote about 80% of the content of our award-winning Spanish courses. I love languages, I love learning languages, and I love creating language courses. Now, I do have to give credit where credit is due. I have to tell you honestly that although I did a ton of research on the best ways to create our language courses, I believe a lot of the success of our courses came through inspiration from above. Now, a little more on management. I'm the kind of manager who likes to come up with ideas, get ideas from my team, and use them all together to create something greater than any of us could have come up with individually. I'm always up for feedback from anyone if it's going to make a product better. To manage budgets in a small business, if we didn't keep within our budget, we would have gone out of business. Now, more specifically, to keep on time and on budget, I implemented some things I learned in audiobooks and from experience over the years that worked very well. I don't have time to go into everything we did, but here are a few highlights. First, we would always plan out every project very well. We knew all the features and the complexity of each project before starting. This had to include project development, programming, testing, and debugging, which can take a very large amount of time. In the early days, we always would overlook the debugging. I've learned my lesson since. Next, the developers would do an internal planning session that would generally take 1 to 2 weeks and come back with a goal time frame and milestones for every key component of the project. Each milestone or component would usually be completed typically within 2 to 4 weeks. I continually worked with our developers to help them become better at setting goals and estimating timeframes. After a period of time and some experience, they became very good at projecting accurate times for completing projects. But it took some trial and error for them to become effective at predicting accurate times. Next, we had to be pretty strict about feature creep. In other words, making sure they didn't add exciting new features that would, quote, make the software even better. We kept those features on a list for future releases. We would then look for project bottlenecks and figure out how to solve them. Finally, we had a system for meetings to facilitate the whole process that came from a fantastic book called Death by Meeting. There's a quick disclaimer. I believe there is a swear word in that meeting, in that book, so you're on your own. Here's what we implemented. First, a 5-minute daily check-in to go over tasks for the day. A weekly goal-setting meeting with achievement and accountability tracking that usually went a half an hour. And we also had a monthly strategic meeting that usually went 2 to 3 hours. Those are just a few of the core items I implemented to help us come in on time and on budget on just about all of our projects. Now, a little of my experience in working with people with differing views. One of the values I've emphasized in the teams I've managed over the years is this. It's each person's responsibility to bring up meaningful conflicting views, in a productive way of course, that will help the organization make the best decisions possible. Then, once a decision has been made, we all support it and are unified in accomplishing it. I implemented that value after 8 years in business with many early years of struggle in working with individuals who didn't see eye to eye. I learned about it in a book I read and refined it through experience. Now, for an example, I worked with a person who I'll call Jeff. He was a very smart, genius-type software programmer who always, quote, knew things should be done his way. However, usually the marketing department, customer service, and others like me thought things should be done very differently. If we ever decided to do things someone else's way, Jeff would be noticeably upset for days and cause a decrease in morale in much of our team. After implementing the value and having a serious talk with Jeff, I let him know that when there was an issue, we wanted to hear everyone's opinion. Then, when a decision was made, regardless of whose idea it was, mine or his or someone else's, for the good of the whole, we all needed to support it. I also worked with him to help him understand that if we didn't decide to use his idea, there was nothing personal meant towards him. After that, Jeff wasn't perfect, but he was much more pleasant to work with. Next, I'll share examples of successful products I've taken from idea to implementation. I've been very fortunate, and I'm thankful that over the past 18 years, I've been able to supervise and work directly with the creation of 27 different language courses. If you want, I can bring samples to show you later. In a nutshell, my company created physical manuals, workbooks, and teacher training systems that were used to teach at major corporations. Audio CDs, MP3 courses, software, and many online courses were sold in over 130 countries. As mentioned in my resume, 4 of our Spanish courses won national educational awards just a few years ago. All of these products were successful and made money, although of course some made dramatically more than others. Thankfully, we didn't have any flops. Here are a few things I learned from creating those products. With the development of each course, I learned a ton in working with people and about software, materials, and the online environment. Now for a little more of what I learned about management. For the first 6 to 7 years of my 18 years in the language industry, honestly, I have to say I was a pretty bad manager. I could give you examples later if you want. Then I went to training seminars and spent 9 years listening to 59 audiobooks specifically on leadership and business management. Thanks to the knowledge I gained and implementation, I've had people I worked with over the latter part of my career be very complimentary about my management and leadership skills. I'm thankful I was able to learn and improve, and I can honestly say now that I love working with people. Here are just a few specific things I learned in both management and language learning over the years. I learned how to work with people and ways to motivate them. I learned how to gain consensus among different groups as much as possible. I learned how to make products that our customers or target audience needed and wanted. I learned by testing and tracking customer testimonials and feedback what works in language learning and what doesn't. I learned how to make products intuitive and user-friendly. I learned that a tri-blended technique works well to learn a language: classroom, software, and audio CDs or MP3s. I also learned that some people could even learn well enough to eventually become translators even with just software, and of course practice with others, if the software is good enough. I learned how to keep people motivated learning languages on their own. I learned that if I created excellent products, better than others on the market, people would keep returning to purchase additional products over and over and over. I learned the key points to making language courses work better and more efficiently than the competition. I learned which development platforms I should use and which ones are becoming obsolete. I learned about product life cycles. Finally, a big lesson I learned was that I should have gotten into mobile platforms years ago. In other words, I've learned to stay ahead of technology before it comes back to bite you. Now a little on my experience designing language courses and proselyting materials. When I create or design a language course, here's a rough outline of the process that worked for me. I came up with what the goal of the course is. I always think deeply about how we could teach concepts in a much faster and more efficient way with higher retention. Then I do research and study language learning techniques. Next, I talk to PhDs in language learning if they're available. Then I usually look at other non-language learning educational software for ideas and games. Next, I pray for help and inspiration. Then inspiration usually will start to flow. Sometimes I would have a whole language course come to my mind in just a few days, and sometimes it would take weeks or months to fully come together. Sometimes my brain would get stuck, and I found that as I shared ideas with others and got their input, then breakthroughs would happen. I absolutely love this process and love helping others learn languages. Apart from family successes, maybe the only thing that is more of a thrill for me than seeing someone successfully learn a language is to see someone embrace the gospel and get baptized. With that in mind, in 2009, I started a nonprofit website called religionresourcesonline.org, which sends referrals to the missionaries. I wrote 102 articles that would come up in search engines that answer people's questions related to the gospel. Through that site, I've learned a ton about the missionary referral process. I have ideas for creating digital products to help the referral process. I've also had ideas about making digital area books with reminders. Just so you're aware, I do also have experience designing and managing the creation of more than just language courses. Now a little bit more about online learning. As briefly mentioned before, my company, under my direct supervision, has created 12 online courses, from simple to complex, including an exam tracking system. The last online learning system we created included 7 languages and was integrated with social media. To motivate people to continue, we gave individuals rewards for logging in and for learning, including points to earn downloadable MP3s and an option to see how their friends were doing. We built it a year ago and almost finished it before selling my company. I just checked, and with almost no promotion, it's grown a lot more than I anticipated. Next, I'll move on to challenges in teaching languages to those who've received their mission calls. For years, I've given Spanish courses free to individuals who've received their mission calls and casually tracked their progress. Here are the challenges I've seen over the years. The first is time. Called missionaries may be finishing high school or in the middle of college and have limited time. A possible solution is to create audio downloads for these students who can listen while exercising, commuting, or walking across campus. This could be done using the recorded words from the TAL program. This type of product is simple to create and very low cost. I've created many MP3s like that in the past. The second is motivation. Some just don't see the need. They think that waiting to learn their language at the MTC is just fine. Here are possible solutions. A letter from an important church leader about the importance of learning the language beforehand could be very motivating. A social media system mixed with language learning and appropriate online language learning games with a social competition factor could also provide great motivation and keep people's attention. I had a programmer who was a college student create such a system in about 3 months. The third that I've seen is not knowing where to go to learn. For example, my niece got a mission call last month and had no idea where to go to start learning Spanish. A potential solution could be if we could have information in their mission call and on the missionary portal, it could help them know where to go to learn. We could also consider emailing them or sending them a special letter with information. Fourth, some may start their language but may not find courses engaging enough to keep their attention. Here's a potential solution. Having an instructor meet with learners once a week online is a very motivational way to learn a language. The instructor could recommend online learning and MP3 downloads to prepare for the online classes. Something similar is done on verbaling.com. I have a large presentation about this that I'd be glad to share if I had more time. Now briefly about myself. I have a wife and 5 kids, ranging from a daughter on a mission right now in Spokane, Washington, down to a 3-year-old. I speak Spanish with my kids when they're young, and they all have Spanish nicknames. Since 2001, I've had many impressions that someday I would be working in languages directly helping the Lord's work. With that in mind, over the years, I've worked hard to develop my talents in language learning, leadership, and management. If now is the time this comes to pass, and I get to work with all of you, I'd be thrilled. I feel like it would be a blessing in my life and hopefully a blessing for you. I would love to come help contribute as well as learn from all of you. If I get the job, I would also start on a PhD in instructional psychology and technology. Gracias. Merci. Danke. Domo arigato gozaimasu.